How did we get here? And they got us talking about bullshit. Meanwhile, this shit is going on and nobody says a peep. An educated and united public cannot be controlled. Get organized. Learn to be active. The guy who was Putin's opposition, the opposition leader, he died in prison. A lot of people are saying that he was killed. They did attempt to poison him more than once, so it wouldn't be surprising that he died. But it could just be the brutal conditions of the prison. That prison is set up to be brutal. It's really cold, and the guy could have died as a result of that, or could have been poisoned. Either way, it works in the benefit of Putin, because this guy was his main, rival, even though he probably had no real chance of like defeating Putin politically, but he still represented an opposition to Putin. Those guys over there don't have any patience for stuff like that. It says death of Kremlin foe. I don't like the way they do these headlines. Anyways, death of Kremlin foe Alexei Navalny provokes Western outrage, but few concrete actions to stop Putin. I don't know what the hell we could do over here on the other side of the world related to this. Like, we're going to take Putin to trial or something. Like, and then where's the evidence? Let's see what this video shows. Freaking ads. What reacts to Navalny's death? Says people and politicians around the world have been reacting to the death of Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny. I promise I won't give up, and I will take the revenge for Alexei by any possible means. I call on everyone not to give up. These scumbags don't deserve our desperation. In Munich, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expressed his condolences to Navalny's family.
For more than a decade.
Wait, let me pause for a second. This is a thing that shows, like, people want to say that Russia is like united behind Putin, but they're clearly not. And the government of Russia isn't the same as the people of Russia. And we have to make that separation, because here in the United States, Biden is the president. And then you're like, the other people in other countries around the world are like, hey, he's your president. Don't you support him or whatever? Like, whatever views or political views or things that he say while he's on TV, they're like, that those are your views because you are a citizen of the United States and that's your president. So then the same thing, you would be like, that's crazy talk. But we tend to forget it when on the other side, when we look at Russia and we're like, oh, it's Putin and he's the Kremlin and he's evil and whatever, and the people of Russia are the same. And it's like there's a disconnect there in our thinking, to think that we don't agree with our president here in the United States with the things that they do, and we feel like it's unfair for other countries, people from around the world, to align us with the political views of our president. But we turn around and do the same thing to the people of Russia and act like they're all just evil or whatever because Putin is their president.
Russian government, Putin, have persecuted, poisoned, and imprisoned Alexei Navalny. And now, reports of his death. First and foremost, if these reports are accurate, our hearts go out to his wife and to his family.
Zu Beginn dieser Münchner Sicherheitskonferenz haben uns furchtbare Nachrichten erreicht. Alexei Nawalny stand wie kaum ein anderer für ein freies und demokratisches Russland. Genau deswegen musste er sterben.
It says in Russia, ad hoc expressions of respect were shown as people laid flowers. Although one woman unfurling a banner was, I can't read it, immediately something. Yeah, so this is kind of a big story, and well, the media is making it into one, but I think it is something, because it's an election happening, right? Election happening over there. Putin's gonna win again, of course, but it's like I think political opposition is a healthy thing um, in politics. If you don't have any opposition, then how can you keep them honest or whatever? They're just going to do whatever they want to do. They don't have any opposition. The people aren't going to completely agree with them all the time. So there needs to be pressure to push them into directions that the people, you know, that reflects the wishes of the people. Like I have a post, I'm going to get into it in a minute, but it's like about how they're supposed to be our representatives, but the way things work is more like the politicians tell us what to do instead of vice versa. So in Russia, if there's more pressure against Putin, then it would put him in a position where he needs to make decisions that benefit all of the Russian people, not just his cronies or whatever, And it's important because we think about how it is here with Trump and his fans or whatever, and the stuff that he does to please his fans. But if he becomes the president, at the end of this year, at the beginning of next year, he'll be the president of the whole United States, not just his fans. So therefore his policies should reflect, the wishes of, the American people as a whole and not just his fans. And we can see how a small group can have so much power. Looking at the House of Representatives and the Senate, and you look at the House, and the House is a mess, and you have a small group that is just wreaking havoc in the House and basically getting their way, you know, uh, and it's not representing the will of the majority of the people. It's only representing the will of you know, an extreme minority, which is not good. So it says, as outrage over the death of chief Kremlin foe Alexei Navalny reverberates across the world, Russian President Vladimir Putin is turning a deaf ear to Western anger as he prepares to extend his 24-year rule in an election next month, and police across Russia continue to squelch any protest attempts. So it's like, that's the thing here in the United States. They always be like, when people are protesting, they're like, get a job, go home. It's like, you don't have anything else to do or whatever. When they're protesting against something that they don't, agree with or whatever. But if it's something they do agree with, and they're like, oh, they're doing some righteous thing or whatever. But people should have the ability to protest and have their voices heard when they don't agree with things. And so, but here, in Russia, they're not being very friendly to people who are, not happy with the way things are going. So here in the States, we are having that more and more here also. So the way we point fingers at Russia and saying they're so horrible or Putin is so horrible, but then we turn around and do the exact same things, it's kind of weird to me how we don't make that connection. It says the U.S. and its allies are pondering new sanctions against Russia over Navalny's death and the Kremlin's recent actions in Ukraine. But as U.S. aid for Ukraine remains stuck in Congress and NATO allies in Europe struggle to fill the gap, many wonder what the West can actually do to stop the ruthless Kremlin leader, given that multiple previous rounds of penalties have failed to. So the ruthless Kremlin leader, you know, and yeah, what the hell can we really do, besides a full scale war with Russia, And then at the end of the day, what is it our business too, like we have problems here. We got to, America first. We got issues we need to deal with. We need to sweep around our own front door, our own back door. Trying to be the world's police is what's leading us to this position that we're in now, where we're completely overextended. And the sanctions didn't do anything but hurt Europe, and the regular people of Russia. And like I said before, those people don't necessarily agree with the things that Putin does. But then we do these sanctions, and the elite people in Russia, are fine. They're good to go. The regular Russians are the ones that's going to suffer as a result of those sanctions. And it has backfired, and Europe is the ones, that, especially Germany, suffering as a result of those sanctions. And then, communism, where they want to say that, and it's like all the people in Russia are not the same, and their economic situations are not the same. That's the reason why you have the bourgeoisie in Russia who get to do whatever the hell they want to do, and they're good, even regardless of these sanctions. It just hurt regular folks. It says, there isn't really the room for any great value in additional sanctions against Russia. Already one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, Mark Gigliotti, head of the London-based Mayak intelligence consultancy firm, noted in a YouTube commentary. Yeah, we're going to do more sanctions. Probably just hurt the regular people, and Putin just goes on and continue to do what he wants to do. It says, instead, Gigliotti said, the West should focus more on working with Navalny's allies and helping ordinary Russians get access to information channels that counter Kremlin propaganda. Yeah, but you can also say that is interference in Russia's politics or Russia's elections. And that's the same thing that we're saying that Russia does to the United States. And I'm not saying that they don't do that, and major countries around the world, they all have interest in influencing elections in other countries. So they're all doing it. There's no good guys when it comes to this type of deal. But yeah, so a lot of information is censored from the regular folks in Russia. But what we have to understand here in the United States, a lot of information is censored to us about the United States. So when another country just wants the American people to have better information, then that is considered, election interference and all of this or whatever. So, but we feel like it's important for the Russian people to get better information. It says such efforts are key, especially now, according to Gigliotti, who described Navalny's death as yet another step in Putin's transition from hybrid authoritarianism to brutal thuggish despotism. The U.S. and NATO allies have been weighing more actions to bolster support for Ukraine, where the Russian military has just forced Ukraine troops to retreat from the key eastern stronghold of Avdiivka. After a 4-month ferocious battle, the allies discussed ways to increase the cost of war to Russia to force Putin to back down. Not going to happen. It says, but the 71-year-old leader has vowed to press on, refusing to relinquish any of his gains and declaring in an interview with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson last week that the West will sooner or later be forced to negotiate a deal on his terms. And that's what he's saying. He said, hey, we're going to decide the future of Ukraine. It says Navalny's death shows Putin's complete ruthlessness and disdain for both Western and international opinion, said Nigel Cole-Davis, a former British ambassador to Belarus and senior fellow for Russian and Eurasia at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London. Russia announces Navalny's death on Friday, just as Western leaders gather at a security conference in Munich. And the way they're talking is like, for sure, Putin basically killed this guy, but they don't really have any evidence to say that. And not to say that that's what happened or what didn't happen. It's just to say that the media automatically jumps on board with this with no real evidence to support it other than their, preconceived notions of how Putin moves. I mean, we do have evidence of previous situations similar to this where nefarious acts was done by Putin and his cronies or whatever. But still, we don't have any evidence that that's actually what happened here. So jumping the gun and deciding that that's what happened, I think is doesn't show journalistic integrity. It says Putin is throwing down a gauntlet to the West, Gold Davies said. As we come up to the second anniversary of the Ukraine war, he is again testing Western resolve. He's testing Western resolve. Like, this is some stuff that's going on within his country. Like, how is that testing Western resolve? So the United States is supposed to have power over everything across the world, including whatever's happening within Russia's political sphere. And he's testing our resolve by doing whatever he does there related to his elections. It says Navalny's death should serve as a wake-up call to U.S. Republicans opposing aid for Ukraine in Congress, and also encourages European NATO allies to bolster their assistance to Ukraine. So that's the point of this, right? So then they make this a big news story to be like, look, that's the reason why we need to make sure that we're sending money to Ukraine, because Putin is killing his opposition leaders. It says, ultimately, it depends on the lessons that the West draws, he said. And what's crazy is that Navalny was in jail for, what was it? It's like he said something against Putin or whatever. He said some things, like he was basically in jail for stuff he said, Being an opposition leader is the reason why they put him in jail. And it's like, over here in the States, I could totally see Putin, Trump was saying that stuff, And it's like, I think that if the same thing happened here in the States, a lot of people would go with that. It's like, lock her up, lock her up. Are you saying lock her up based on her doing criminal activities? Or are you saying lock her up based on her political views and things that she's said? It says, ultimately, it depends on the lesson that the West draws, he said. But Navalny's death didn't appear to move the U.S. House Speaker Friday to commit to a proposed $61 billion aid package for Ukraine, seen as crucial to a Ukrainian victory. I don't know, man. All the money that they've been sending to Ukraine, and it hasn't got them a victory yet. What do we think another $61 billion is going to actually do? And like I say, I think the whole reason why the media is bigging up this story is to put pressure on sending more money to Ukraine. It says, meanwhile, Putin, the longest-serving Russian leader since Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, is steamrolling toward another 6 years in power in a campaign involving three token rivals nominated by Kremlin-friendly parties. Boris Nemtsov, a liberal politician who made ending the war in Ukraine his chief campaign slogan, was barred from running by election officials. Yet, while there was little doubt that Putin would prevail in the election, Navalny's death still demonstrates how much he saw Navalny as a threat. I think that's true. The way the Kremlin has conducted the election campaign so far suggests that they are not confident, he said, adding that even from prison, Navalny managed to get his voice out. He doesn't want any voices of opposition. Like, he doesn't want his people to be hearing opposition voices. Navalny's death just weeks before the March 15, 17 presidential election possibly marked the final act of dismantling and crushing of any semblance of Russian organized opposition ahead of the vote, Gold Davis said. Despite his assured victory next month, Putin still fears Western interference in the election and viewed Navalny as an adversary manipulated by the West to undermine national and state interests, said Tatiana Stanovoya, senior fellow of the Carnegie Russian Eurasian Center. Of course he would say that, but I mean, so he feels that there aren't people that are in Russia that don't agree with the stuff that he's doing. Oh, it's the Western interference. That's the reason why these people are, having an opposition to the stuff I do. And it's the same thing that happens here in the States with the politics. It's like, oh no, it's not the people that have a problem with, this, that, or the other. It's the Russians influencing them to, and financing them or whatever. Or they'll say, what's the guy's name? I can't think of his name right now. It's some rich guy who's paying for these people to go out there and protest. And that's the reason why they're out there protesting. It's not that they really have a problem with the way things are going here in the States. Investigate both sides of the argument, come up with your own conclusions.